Hello and welcome to a new devlog video for Peasant Uprise. Aside from a couple of hiccups during the build process, I have to say that the game looks pretty good. However, after taking a closer look at the frames per second, I was a bit worried. On low setting, the game was getting 60 frames per second, which is my goal. On medium, it dropped 10 frames per second to the low 50s. On high, I was hovering around 40. I'm expecting things to go a bit tight on Ultra because it's a setting designed for high-end computers. And while I do have a good PC, it's 3 or 4 years old now. And finally, on Ultra, it was in the low 30s. The way I wanted to tackle optimization was to first look at those things which can improve performance without affecting the visual quality at all. Now, this may seem a bit strange, but once I started looking into this option, I actually found quite a few ways in which I could greatly improve things. Unity already provides automatic cooling, which is the notion of not rendering objects which are far from the camera. However, some settings needed some tweaking to get the most out of this optimization feature. As you can see here, these two buildings are being drawn even though they are not really that close to the camera at the moment. It turned out that my camera distance went much farther than it needed to be, and that's why cooling was not really affecting as many objects as I had hoped. I also spotted a particle effect that was really taking a beating. It was improperly placed and it was in a spherical shape. So really only about a quarter of the effect was actually visible, and it was continuously pouring 1000 particles. Half of those under the terrain and a quarter behind the camera. So I also did some adjustments here and ended up with a cone shape effect that only required 300 particles. And it still managed to look the same as before. Thus far, these three optimizations don't really affect the quality of the game, because I'm really just cutting down things that are not even visible by the player. Unity has support to set and apply different quality settings for your game, but it's more of a global approach to quality. I wanted to extend this by removing some visual enhancements like the clouds and other effects based on the quality settings chosen by the player. Peasant Uprise does make use of a lot of visual effects besides post-processing to achieve this look. However, these permanent effects are very costly, but I still wanted to preserve as much visual quality as possible. So I wrote a quick script that does just that. It will destroy the object if it doesn't meet a minimum quality requirement. Now obviously, instantiating an object to then go ahead and destroy it is not really the way to go, but this was a good enough proof of concept to move forward with this idea. So the next step was to change this process so the script manages the instantiation of these elements following some quality guidelines, and instead of destroying objects, it just decides whether to instantiate or not. Moving on to the long-term optimization strategies, one that I have in mind is to reduce the number of draw calls to the graphics API. One way to reduce these calls is to batch them together whenever possible. Based on the Unity documentation, one of the suggestions for batching is to have objects share the same material. And you can do this by having a texture atlas or grid and make as many objects as possible comply with this atlas. If you've been following these devlogs for a while, you'll notice that I'm mostly using the same texture grid when creating UV maps in Blender. So this is something that I've been already doing, but there are still quite a lot of objects that do have their own material. In addition, I can set this material to be GPU instantiated, and testing on the first level, the draw calls went from 2,400 to roughly 1,100. That's a pretty steep drop, and a lot of the models are not using my texture atlas. Obviously, recreating UV maps for each model will take quite a long time, hence that's why I consider this an ongoing long-term strategy. I did also take a stab at profiling, but didn't really spot any situation that would require changes. I think this is best done when my rebellion has a good amount of peasants, so maybe that way some of the actions take longer and could be optimized. There is a ton of code written for Peasant Uprise, and there is also some code which is probably obsolete, so a good code revision and cleaning is also on my list of tasks to do long term. So that's it for this week. I'm glad to say that performance is decent at this point in time, and most importantly that I have a strategy moving forward to keep improving it. I know some footage might seem a bit laggy, but that's because I'm running the game, the Unity editor, and recording video all at the same time. I really hope this video helps those in game development to get a few tips of areas to look into for optimization, as well as some techniques people use to achieve higher frames per second. For those who are not in game development, I hope you find interesting to see the little tricks that we use to improve performance in games. Either way, let me know in the comments what you think about this devlog, and please do share some ideas I could look into to further optimize game performance. Please like, subscribe, and click on the bell to receive notifications of future uploads. I'm happy to have received quite a few responses for the current poll. Thanks so much for participating. For those who have not cast your vote yet, I will be running it for an extra week. I can't help but feel a bit nostalgic when looking at some of the first few devlogs, and it's a bit wild to visualize the entire process and how the project has progressed to become what it's now. With that said, I'll see you in the next update.